Well, I think it's about time probably to start. I'd like to say hello, fellow cellos on Cello Bello. My name is Bob Jesselson, and welcome to this cello chat on the art of practicing. I hope everybody is staying isolated and healthy in these challenging times. First of all, I'd like to thank Paul Katz, the creator of Cello Bello, for the fantastic website that he has put together here. It's incredibly important in these times of these challenging times, but it's important every day to be able to have this kind of contact with other cellists. It's really terrific. I'd also like to thank the staff of Cello Bello, the blogmaster Thomas Bard, and especially I'd like to thank William Su, who's absolutely amazing at figuring out the technology. It's been rather complicated. And in fact, I'm not seeing myself on my iPad, which I have set up over here. So I might ask my wife, if she's hearing me, to bring in her iPad so I hopefully can see myself there and make sure that this is on and get some comments. Let me say up front that this is going to be a little bit different kind of a cello chat. It's less of a chat in the sense of questions and answers the way most of these cello chats have been. It's a little bit more like a lecture. So we'll probably take questions more towards the end or something. Since we're all in isolation anyway, this is a good time to think about our practicing, which of course we have to do when we're isolated anyway by ourselves. So this cello chat today, called Practically Perfect Practicing, focusing on our practicing, is intended for teachers and for students at any level, and for amateurs and professionals. And it's a time to kind of rethink what we are doing when we're practicing, which of course we spent a lot of time as musicians doing. At one point in my life, I really thought that successful musicians were just born knowing how to play their instruments. Making music to me seemed so magical that I had a difficult time to kind of separate out the idea of raw talent and hard work. As I grew older, I began to realize the truth of that old saw about success being 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. Really, it's true that the finest musicians don't just rely on their talent. They're hard workers who put in many hours of practice, and at some point in their life at least, whether it was early on or later, they've had to focus on practicing. I like to think of Albert Einstein, his comment about, it's not that I'm so smart, it's that I stay with problems longer. My wife is sending me a message here. Move over the title.
Well, what he said is move over so they see more of you, I think.
Oh, I see. Okay, let's see if I can do that.
Sorry.
Move over the title.
Well, he said something about
Okay, well, all right. Anyway, I like to think of that comment by Albert Einstein that it's not that I'm smart, it's that I stick with problems longer. And I think that really is true of successful musicians that I know. The ones who really go far are ones who keep working with and thinking about their own, practicing the pieces they're working on and so forth. They just stick with the problem longer. Some of you know that I started actually playing the cello seriously at age 21. I was a student in Freiburg in Germany, and at that time I practiced literally 9 or 10 hours a day. I promise, really practicing that much. And I needed to do that to catch up with colleagues who were way further advanced than I was. But nobody really explained to me at that time how to go about practicing. I had wonderful teachers, but nobody really sat me down and explained various concepts about practicing. And I had to figure out a lot of stuff for myself. Click PDF once, okay? Click PDF once. I clicked it. I'm not sure what the problem is exactly, but there's some problem, I guess, coming out. I'm not. Sarah, if you can bring me your iPad so I can see what it looks like, that might help. I had to kind of figure out how to practice. And so, as I said, I was practicing 9-10 hours, but I realized that I really wasn't practicing very efficiently and very effectively. I wasted a lot of time. And gradually, over a couple of years, I figured out how to reduce that amount of time to much less, 3 hours or so, but I actually accomplished more. And when I became a teacher and professional, so forth, I I got that down then to an hour and a half or something. But I was accomplishing much more because I knew how to practice efficiently. I'm not seeing anything here, Sarah, so that's not helping. So now I spend a lot of time in lessons talking and showing how to practice. So it's very important that people know how to practice well. We're with our students just an hour or so a week. They're alone with themselves for much more time. So if they're practicing, let's say, a half hour a day, that means about 3 hours a week. If they're practicing 2 hours a day, that means about 14 hours or so that they're by themselves and trying to figure out how to accomplish things. Well, how do you know whether you're practicing well? What's the telltale signs of good practicing? It's not how many hours you're putting in, but if you're getting results. So, for example, if you go into a lesson and you're not really as well prepared as you should be, that's a good telltale sign. If you go on stage or you play in a master class, those are all times where you can kind of check yourself and rethink about how you're actually practicing. And we all have to discover for ourselves what is good. Everybody's different, and everybody practices different. Everybody's brains are a little different. So different folks, different strokes. And so I've heard from a lot of different people in professional musicians, really fine musicians, about tricks that they use in practicing. One thing I heard from Jean-Pierre Rampal, the great flutist, French flutist, said that he hardly practiced, this is later in his life, he hardly practiced at all. He practiced on stage, which is kind of interesting that he obviously had a great technique and had played the repertoire and so forth, but what he was refining then, now I don't recommend that for most of us, but at that point in his career, that was working for him. So what is practicing actually? Well, practicing is acquiring new skills. It's making them into good habits. It's basically a set of learned behaviors and responses. And it requires a lot of self-analysis and criticism in the process of improving our own ability. So remember that practice does not make perfect, but if we could practice perfectly, perfect practice makes perfect. Since we're not all 100% of the time and so forth, I'm calling this session, as you see on the right there, Practically Perfect Practicing. And so what I'm going to do now is go through various aspects in a somewhat organized fashion. A lot of stuff maybe not, incredibly new for people, but if you rethink some of the things about your own practicing, you may be able to improve on it. So let's get started. First of all, I'll just show you what we're going to, the overview of this thing is just looking at 10 different points of practicing here. And we'll start with the first one there, proper environment. So what that means is that you're in a place with adequate light, that the temperature is good, there's no distractions like no TV right around, no food or refrigerator right around, probably no books. Well, you see, this is my studio here at home, so there are a lot of books around here for me, but I have to stay away from them. No computer. It would be a really important thing that you're not constantly distracted and checking messages and that sort of thing. For cellists, really important that you have the right chair, the right height chair. They used to in schools especially have really low chairs for cellists, and that's just not great. Well, the situation, of course, the proper environment isn't always going to be perfect, and especially now when you're at home practicing. For a lot of students who are at conservatories, they're practice rooms, which are little monk cells, and those are pretty good for practicing because there are no distractions with food and TV and books and that sort of thing right around. But it's never quite perfect, I'm sure, whatever situation you're in. And I'm reminded of a friend of mine who was a principal cellist, became later a principal cellist of an orchestra in Canada. He grew up in Israel on a kibbutz, and he said that all the students who were studying instruments, piano, clarinet, violin, cello, all had to practice at the same time and in the same place. They all practiced in the big dining hall. And so from whatever time, 2 to 3 or whatever, they were practicing all together in different corners of the dining room. And you can imagine what kind of cacophony of sound that must have been. But what he said about himself is that because he was in his little corner facing just the corner of the wall, he developed incredible sense of concentration and focus because he couldn't be listening to everybody else around him. And he became obviously a really, really fine cellist. So that's proper environment. By the way, you see on the thing there, it says score. Sometimes I do this little session on practicing at summer camps and festivals and so forth, and with students. And I ask people to score themselves. You don't have to do that now, but you know, if you want, you can kind of give yourself a sense of how you're doing, and especially if you have a different place where you practice normally at your conservatory or your university, how you're doing compared with now and compared with the usual situation. You may find that some of these things are actually better now in some way. So the second thing there is regular practice. And I have a quote there, two quotes there, one by Ernst Bloch, the composer and director, former director of the Cleveland Institute. He said, "It's better to practice 1 hour a day, but every day, than to make a great spasmodic effort and then stop." Actually, I can probably make this a little bigger for people to see. Let's see, how do I do that? There we go. So you might be able to see things a little better there. And the other quote is by Gordon Epperson. "Don't wait for the spirit to move you. Sit down and start whether you feel like it or not." So the idea of regular practice, that you just establish some kind of a routine, the same time, the same place for your practicing. It's kind of like brushing your teeth. That sort of feels bad if you don't brush your teeth in the morning or in the evening before you go to bed or something. It sort of doesn't feel quite right. Well, the same thing eventually will happen with practicing. If you practice every day at the same time and you don't practice on a certain day, you're going to feel like something's missing a little bit. And we all have to figure out what is the best time of day to practice for ourselves. And everybody, again, is different with this. I'm really a night person, so I like to practice 10, 11 o'clock at night, and that's my choice now, to be practicing usually very late in the evening. But you have to figure out when your good times are and how it fits into your schedule. So if you're tired, then that's not going to be so great. For example, in my case, I always have a real drop in energy around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I have gotten used to taking, I'm really not going to sign out the practice room for the next day always. So if you got there at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, all the practice rooms were already signed out by the Chinese students and the Japanese students and the Korean students who were very diligent. So I figured out, okay, I have to get up really early. I have to get there by 6:30. And then when I was there, that's a horrible time for me because I'm not a morning person. But I did figure out, okay, I'm up, I'm there, I might as well do a little bit of practicing. So I started my 10 hours or whatever of practicing at that time. And I did maybe an hour or so at that time. And then I gave myself a treat and went out and got cafe and kuchen. And that was a nice, well, it wasn't kuchen, it was brötchen then in the morning. Kuchen was in the afternoon. But I gave myself a little bit of a treat. And so what I figured out then, I'll talk more about this later, but what I figured out at that time, there were some things that would exercise or something like that to get me going, doing some stretching and things like that. And if I were to try to do more sophisticated kind of practicing at that time, that probably wouldn't have worked so much. The other really important thing about regular practice is a lot of research has shown that our concentration can last generally for most people about 20 minutes, and then things start to sag a little bit. So it's good to divide up your practicing into 20-minute segments for best kind of concentration, whether it's 20, 25, 15, whatever it is for you, but you figure out the best amount of time. Obviously, we need to also be able to play and concentrate for much longer periods of time. If you're going to practice for 40, if you're going to play the Dvorak concerto for 40 minutes or a Bach suite for 25 minutes, you have to be able to practice and concentrate longer. But you can train that in certain ways. And keep in mind that it's always good to take a little break, 20 minutes, maybe not a big break, maybe just get up, walk around, and come back. That might be a good way to do it. So that's regular practice. The next thing that I have on there is what I call disciplined practicing. So disciplined practicing means not noodling passages. Noodling passages, just running through things, is not really practicing. You have to demand continual progress of yourself. You can't just repeat things ad infinitum, ad nauseum. And it's not about the quantity of practicing, really. It's about the quality, how well you're practicing, not how much you're practicing. One of the key things with discipline practicing is concentration, not letting the mind wander. And you have to figure out ways and train the brain to be able to concentrate. So one of the things I have for myself, let's see, so I said some of those things just now. Noodling passages, not practicing, concentration, demand continual progress for yourself. The whole concept of self-discipline. I think one of the wonders and one of the wonderful things about music is that it teaches us a good kind of, a healthy kind of self-discipline. And just as an example of that, I had a student many years ago who started studying with me when she was maybe 10 or 12 or something. And by the time she was 14 or 15, she developed diabetes. And later on, she told me, after she had graduated actually, she told me that her doctors said that she was the most disciplined patient that they ever had, that she never missed taking care of herself, insulin and so forth. And she said to me that she felt that she learned about discipline through the cello, and that translated itself when she had a health crisis, as she did, and she was able to deal with it and has dealt with it very well for all these years. And I've always taken that as an important kind of sign for me of the importance of self-discipline and these kind of things. And just one other story about another student that I had that was he was in, I think, about ninth grade or something, pre-college student, and he was having a real hard time with memorization and with coming in just knowing the scales and knowing the arpeggios that are expected to learn. And I was getting kind of frustrated, and after a few weeks of that, I was thinking, maybe I'm not the right teacher. Maybe he needs to go to somebody else who's not expecting this kind of thing. And all of a sudden, one week, the next week or so, he came in, and everything was great. He had the scale memorized. He has his arpeggios, all 7 of the fuer arpeggios memorized, and everything was really, really good. And it continued on through the whole lesson. And I said, what's changed? Something's changed. And he said to me that he noticed that his schoolwork has also gotten better. And I really attribute the self-discipline that he learned, again, through the cello, he was applying, even without realizing it, to his schoolwork. I think it's something really important that we can learn, and one of the reasons I think it's very important for young people, as young as possible, to actually start in with some kind of, well, with music in general, some instrument, but also figuring out a little bit the regularity, the self-discipline. So one of the things I have with this discipline practice is having a structure to the practice session. And so what I like to do is kind of I do this with my lessons also. I break it into several different parts of the lesson. So every lesson is going to have 10 minutes or whatever of scales and arpeggios, some exercises, the fuer exercises. If you're interested in seeing what I do with the fuer, you can go on the Cello Bello or my own website and see the fuer bowing exercises, some of those other really important exercises that I do in the beginning with people. Etudes and studies, having the right level of etudes, I think is really important. A lot of people just jump into Popper etudes when they really should be doing Lee etudes and Duport etudes and Franchomme etudes and first Popper etudes before the high school and so forth. So etudes and studies, and then of course pieces, very important, and for some people then sight reading, orchestra music, and so forth. So, but if you divide your 2 hours, let's say, of practicing into segments, then things sort of just breaking down the time makes it seem like the time is going by faster. So that's a really important, for me, an important thing of discipline and organization. And one other thing that I've noticed is very helpful is using practice charts for students. And there's a whole variety of this. I know some people don't like the idea of practice charts, but I think especially for those right brain kind of students who are not completely organized, I think the practice charts can be really helpful. So here's a couple of, I'm showing you a couple of these kind of practice charts that I've used, especially in festivals, music festivals and things where I see people every day and I kind of can check up there on their practicing. And I ask them to write down their goal and then write down whether they've accomplished the goals. And just a couple of words, doesn't have to be a lot of writing, but just a couple of things to be able to see whether, let's see, delete that, whether they've accomplished their goals. Another one is, this one I like a lot, you can see each one of the scales, arpeggios, number 32 foyer, etude number 2, the piece, and so dividing each day into these things and asking when they actually practice that. So I get a sense of how much time they're practicing, not exactly what they're practicing specifically, but just how much time they're doing. And then I can help them figure out the balance of their practice time, whether they're balancing it right. This is one I like a lot. It's hard to see, and I need to view, let's see, tools, view, seem to fit. Yeah, okay. So this one is one that I like, again, at festivals to use, because I see the kids every day. And this is even true for college students. This is not just for young kids. That they write down the date, they write down their overall practice goals for the day. So, okay, I'm going to be focusing in on this, this, and this. And then each one of these slots is supposed to be for 10 minutes. So they have, for 10 minutes, they actually write down their practice goal and write down some kind of a report. Again, not a lot of words, just successful or didn't accomplish it, need to do it again, or whatever, something like that. So the next thing I want to show actually is the effectiveness of this. And this is, this was a student that I had many years ago who came in for his first lesson probably in 10th grade or something, 9th or 10th grade. And he did very well. And I asked him for a practice chart just to kind of see what he was doing. And so here was the first page. This is the first page of that, and that's my writing practice chart and the days. I guess Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You can't read my writing very well. What and when. What he was practicing and when. And you can see he was doing complete open strings. He did scales and arpeggios. He did the 32 variations and so forth. Okay, and you can see sort of the amount of time. Well, this student was wonderful, and he did fantastically. Every week he was prepared, and I never ever asked him for another practice chart again. And at the end of when he graduated high school, he was accepted in San Francisco Conservatory to study with Bonnie Hampton. And I said to him, Teddy, how you did amazing kind of work here in the last 2-3 years. How did you do that? And he said, well, the practice chart really helped me. And I said, what practice chart? I never had asked him again for a practice chart. What's there is the first day of his practicing, the first week. And I was just astounded. And he pulled out then his notebook, which is, if you can see that, this is his notebook. Every page here, well, here's another page this is from a little bit later. But open strings, 10 minutes, foyer, 10 minutes, Saint-Saëns, concerto was working on 30 minutes, scales and arpeggios up there, 30 minutes, Duport, one of the etudes, an hour and 10 minutes, Bruch, I guess he was doing Kol Nidre, 1 hour. So, and you can see it's absolutely consistent, and that's what it is on every page of this notebook, which is absolutely phenomenal. He did it completely by himself because he realized it was helping him. Well, Teddy is Teddy Buchholz, who is now professor of cello at the University of Arizona, and has gone really far in his career, and I congratulate him a lot. And I think a lot of the success was how he figured out organizing his time and his practicing and so forth. By the way, he recently came out with a CD on music by Henry Hadley, who was the first conductor of the San Francisco Orchestra and a cellist. And it's all cello music of Hadley's, which is really wonderfully charming music, sort of encore music in part. And everybody should at least get to know some of those pieces. They're really, really wonderful. So that's Teddy Buchholz is the guy. Here's just a couple of other practice logs that I wrote down. These are not mine. These are from other people. But you can figure out various ways to organize these things. So that was now discipline practicing. And just trying to figure out the way to be as disciplined as possible in your practicing. The next thing is practice musically. And so the quote that's there, practice musically, is from Arthur Schnabel, the great pianist. One should never make any music, not even sound one musical tone, without a musical intention preceding it. And I think that's very wise. If you practice mechanically, you're going to play mechanically. So you have to think about ways to making things musical, even boring exercises, Kosmin exercises and things like that. Etudes, certainly, not just playing the technique, but really trying to play in musical ways. I don't think I need to talk too much more about that. Let's go on to mental practice, which I think is a really important part of our practicing. It's in some ways even more important than actually finger practicing. We're practicing really for our brain and not just the fingers. And I first started figuring this out when I was in Freiburg again. A lot of this stuff I figured out when I was a student in Freiburg. I started teaching in a little music school in Weil am Rhein, which is just north of Basel. So I had to go on the train for about a half hour, 40 minutes from Freiburg to Weil am Rhein. And I really resented that time because I felt like I was wasting my time being on the train and I should have been practicing. And then I realized, okay, I'll have my music here in my bag, and so I'll just open it up and I'll start looking at it. And I was going through it mentally, the music, whatever I was working on, etudes or Bach or whatever. And I realized then the next day that I actually had learned a lot of things that I didn't know I had learned because I had done it mentally. And I started building on that and using a lot of those techniques. And I found out later that that's the way Casals actually practiced. He would, with a new piece, he would read the piece away from the cello, probably at the piano. Rostropovich also, apparently at the piano first. He would put his fingerings in away from the cello. He would start thinking about the details, the nuances, and memorize it, and then he would play. So I had a fantastic experience like that with Alan Harris at Aspen when I was at Aspen one summer in the 70s. And he had me learn the Bach Fifth Suite away from the cello, completely away from the cello. He said, don't touch the cello at all. Put all the fingerings in, think about it musically, figure out bowings, everything, and memorize it before you start playing a note. And so I followed what he said, and it was a fantastic way of learning a piece. Very hard because it was scordatura on top of everything else. I was learning at scordatura. So it was a very complicated way of learning, but it was so deeply in my brain because of the kind of energy that I needed. But it was without moving a muscle, just actually thinking about it all. And along those lines, I had a friend who ran marathons. By the way, Paul Katz used to have this cello class at Eastman when I was there, running not marathons, but doing runs, 10K runs, and the whole studio would do it, and it was a wonderful bonding thing for the whole studio. Paul was a big runner, and I never did a marathon, but I kept up my running. Actually, it was because of Paul. This friend of mine, his father was running marathons, and he got a week or two or whatever before an actual marathon, he hurt his leg a little bit, and he had to stop running before this marathon. So what he did was he sat in his chair and he imagined the run completely through. I guess in preparation for a marathon, you don't do the whole marathon, you do, I don't know, 10 kilometers or something. He would do that. He would sit in his chair and imagine every step of the way. And apparently what's happening, I'm told, is that the muscles are actually doing everything but actually moving. They're actually firing. And it's mind over matter again. He did his marathon. He was better with his legs, were better then, and he did the marathon apparently in the best time he had ever done. So that really was a very important sort of point about how mind over matter, how we can control things just by the think method, as in the Music Man, the think method. It does work, actually, if you have also the substance behind it of having practice. I know that memorization is very important, and I expect my students to do virtually everything from memory, as I had to do in Freiburg. We had to do all of the etudes and so forth from memory, pieces, of course. And I realized that in our American system, we don't do a lot of memorization in school. Very few poems are memorized. Under the spreading chestnut tree, the village smithy stands. The smith, a mighty man is he, with large and sinewy hands. That's about the only poem I know from my school time. But I think that training of memorization is really another important thing for our brains. My father grew up in Germany in the 1920s, and their system there, they had to do lots and lots of memorization. Maybe I should if I can turn off my mail, that might be a good thing. Let's see, mail, quit mail. Okay, then I won't get interrupted anymore. So he had to do lots and lots of memorization of poems, Goethe, Heine, Schiller, and so forth. And at the dinner table, as I was growing up, he would recite complete tracts of Goethe's Faust. And it was wonderful to hear it, but it was incredibly wonderful for his brain. And I realized when I started doing the work in Freiburg, I realized that I needed to really focus on how to improve that. And I think I hope it's going to be helpful nowadays, warding off Alzheimer's. I'm still doing a lot of memorization of new things and trying to keep the brain active in those ways. So the next thing then now is relaxed practicing. The quote there that I have, relaxed practicing, is from Saint-Saëns. One must practice slowly, then more slowly, and finally really slowly. And Yehudi Menuhin, between every effort in your playing and during every pause, deliberately return to a state of relaxation and softness in all your joints. Figuring out relaxed practicing, current hurrying produces tension. And I think a lot of musicians are aware of things like the Alexandra technique, yoga, self-relaxation, hypnosis, all of these kinds of things that can help with relaxation, figuring out, understanding the body so you're using your body in the best possible way. I've done some work with biofeedback with my students, which is very helpful in sensitizing people to releasing tension in the muscles. And one very effective thing is what I call square breathing, which has helped me a lot. Regular breathing for this kind of relaxation breathing, you breathe out through the mouth and in through the nose. And you do that a couple of rounds of that, and it can really reduce blood pressure and help with relaxation. So square breathing is doing that, going in, or rather out first, always out first with the air. So out through the mouth for 4 beats or so, then hold the 4 beats, then in through the nose 4 beats, and then hold 4 beats. So it will be out through the mouth, hold, in through the nose, hold. And if you do that a couple of times around, maybe some of you were doing it as I was doing it now, but you'll find that different parts of your body are just amazingly, like your legs or your thighs and so forth, and especially these parts of the body that we need in playing, they can really immediately be reduced. You can reduce the tension. So I used to do that when I was principal cellist of orchestra in Spain, and then here in South Carolina, the South Carolina Philharmonic. And if you're playing an orchestra and you're solo, all of a sudden you have a little solo in an orchestra piece, you can get a little nervous for those solos. So I used to plan out, actually in the rehearsal, a couple of measures before, to figure out the tempo of the piece and so forth, and do square breathing in the tempo that it was. And by the time I came to the solo, I would just be that much calmer and be able to be a little bit more successful with it. So that has worked a lot, and it's one of those things, if you practice it on a regular basis, then it's really useful. If you just do it once or twice, it's a little useful, but if you really practice that, you can help reduce blood pressure even. I found that it really works in taking care of that or helping that. Number 7 there are set goals. So have specific goals, I think, in your practice session. You should know what you're practicing for. So I put down several things here. I'm not going to speak too long about each one of these things, but if you think in your practicing for at least a part of it, or little segments of your practicing, that you're practicing for your technique, or you're practicing for sound, for tone, intonation, of course, you want to spend a lot of time doing that. Musical phrasing, you're absolutely focused on musical phrasing. Speed, working with metronome and so forth, speeding things up gradually, not suddenly, but gradually. Endurance, that's a really big and important one that people sort of forget about. Practicing, if you're doing a recital, you have to practice for the endurance of doing an hour and a half recital. Concerto, if you're playing Dvorak, 40 minutes, you need to have the endurance to be able to get through that. I remember when I was doing the Sixth Suite with Bernard Greenhouse, I was getting ready for a recital, and I played the entire Sixth Suite for him in a lesson, and he listened through the whole thing, and at the end he said, "Play it again." So the entire lesson, almost the entire lesson, was me playing the Bach Suite 2 times through. And that was a really important lesson for me, because under pressure of playing for him twice, I had to really focus on concentration and so forth. And I think that's a good thing to do for endurance. There are a lot of tricks for these various kinds of things, but for endurance, one of the things is playing things a couple of times, or starting the second page, playing the second page, and then going back to the first page, and then going around again, that kind of thing. So you don't always start in the beginning. Kinesthetic, let's see, the next one, kinesthetic is body awareness, basically. You practice kinesthetically, you're practicing thinking about, I'm doing the détaché with my upper arm and my wrist, or whatever it is, parts of the arm that you're supposed to be using. The next thing is workouts versus playthroughs is something that I'm really into, making clear in a lesson, and for myself also. Okay, am I now playing through a piece because I'm practicing for endurance or practicing for a playthrough of thing, or am I working? Not half and half. It's not like, okay, I'm going to do a playthrough and then I come to a mistake and then no, I need to practice that. It's either one or the other, and if you're clear about it with yourself, it can be very helpful. To know, okay, I'm just practicing now. In 5 minutes, I'm going to do the playthrough, and try that then. The next thing is mental practice. We already talked about that, and then practicing for performance is very important. That I remember Paul Katz used to have us at Eastman actually in the master classes come in our tuxes, or come, because everybody played with tuxes at that time, or come in for women, come in with high heel shoes, because that feels really different when you're in high heel shoes and regular. So to practice the way you're really going to be on stage. I had a friend who was a violinist who used to practice walking around while she was playing, and she would walk around in her studio around in circles and so forth. And then when she came on stage, she had this realization that she can't do that, of course, and it was a very different feeling when you're standing in place and having to practice or perform in place. Cellists don't have quite that problem, but similar kinds of things, making sure that you're really sitting the way you will want to be sitting. Sight reading, obviously, listening, what I call listening practice. Memorization, we talked about, is really important. So have specific goals in that. Number 8 are successful strategies for yourself. And good practicing involves, as most of you know, not just playing through, but practicing spots, practicing the hard things. Music sometimes is like a hilly field, and you have to kind of plane that hill down so it's all flat so you can build a house on it. But if you have a hill, the hard spots, it's hard to build the house on it. So I think it's important to recognize that one is working for the real work, the hard work, and it's hard for younger people sometimes to just start at that spot and not start 5 measures earlier or at the beginning of the piece. I wrote down here 6 sort of practice techniques, which are kind of obvious. Let me see, the next screen probably has it a little big. No, that's okay. So practicing techniques. The first one there is rote, which is repetitive practicing, which is the least interesting, the one that people do a lot, probably too much, rote practicing. But it's the least interesting, least effective one. We do need it sometimes. Go over the same spot a couple of times to make sure something's, but if you're constantly doing rote, it's not the best. What I call ear practicing or oral practicing, a good way to do that is sometimes just turn off all the lights and just listen to the tone, or playing it away from your instrument. singing it. That's all good kind of ear oral practice. Mind practice is the mental practice. Also, I include in that sort of intellectual practice, understanding of the piece, analyzing a piece, studying a piece, working on knowing the harmony in a piece and that sort of thing. Number 4 there is imitative practicing, which can be kind of useful. You know, you can get a lesson with Rostropovich by listening to a recording of him and hearing how he's doing a certain thing. I don't recommend it all the time, certainly, and usually what I tell students is to listen, if you're listening to a certain piece, listen to several recordings with several different cellists, hear several different ways of doing things, and then you can kind of have a lesson with several different people in that way, and then make your own decisions, because it should be really your own. Suzuki method, of course, is based on a lot of imitative kind of work with recordings and so forth, and it's terrific for young kids. I mean, that's the way young kids learn lots of things, by imitating. So it's not, I wouldn't dismiss that. It can be an effective thing. The next one I have down there is what I call discovery practicing. Discovery that's my favorite kind of practicing, and when I was a student, again in Germany, I realized that practice worked best for me late at night, and when the day was done and I had done all my scales and arpeggios and etudes and everything, then I could just kind of explore things, explore different fingerings or different tone colors, or just think out of the box, kind of improvise. Improvising is really good, so I call that discovery practice and encourage that. And then the next one is the memorization practicing, and I did have a couple of things about memorization here, different kinds of memorization that we have. Again, rote is the first one, is probably the least important, least effective, but it's one that we can use. It's a tool we can use. The kinesthetic practicing, again, the physical practice, knowing the positions that you're in, thinking extended position, normal position, bowings, and that sort of thing. The kinesthetics, the physicality of playing. Oral practicing. Photographic practicing is a really good, you can train that. A lot of conductors have good photographic memory, so they can actually see the score, even if it's not in front of them. They see the second oboe and they know it's playing a B flat or whatever. They can use that structurally also for knowing where they are on the piece. I find that a very useful one, especially pieces that have a certain amount of repetition. If I can visualize, I'm in the A section, it's the first time and it does this, and then now I'm at the I'm in the A section when it comes back later, and it's a little bit different, but I see it on the page, and that can be very useful. And you can really train that kind of practicing, photographic. Analytical, very important, understanding the structure of the piece, knowing sonata form, where you are in the piece and how it works, and the harmony and so forth. And then, of course, the mental practice, again, that I mentioned before, doing it all without playing, without moving a muscle, just doing it in your brain. So let's see, next thing. I was going to talk a little about left brain, right brain, because I find that extremely interesting. I'm not going to go far into that right now, but just most of you know the left brain is the logical, rational, analytic, verbal, symbolic, digital, temporal. The right brain is more holistic and intuitive and synthetic and non-temporal. The difference in the right and left brain is when you're thinking left brain or you're practicing and you're realizing it's 1 o'clock and now it's 1:15 and now it's 1:30 and I have to divide my time and stuff, using the left brain. The right brain is, again, when you're on stage and you have that feeling that you came off stage after playing for an hour and you realize, oh my God, that felt like 2 minutes. That's the right brain taking over, which is a great place to be. Now, the important thing with left and right brain, I could speak about this for a long time, but I'm just going to go to the chase, cut to the chase here. The important thing with the left and right brain is that the left brain can only do one thing at a time. The right brain does lots of things. The left brain, if you're in your left brain, you can only do, for example, right now you're listening to me, that's the one thing you're doing. If you're thinking about, oh, this is going on too long and I'm getting kind of hungry and what time is it and when is he going to be done talking, and that's taking questions and all these kind of things, that's the right brain kind of working. It's all these other things. Musicians tend to be from my experience, more right brain, creative people. And so very often I'm working with building a left brain with my students, encouraging them to be thinking a little bit more structurally, a little bit more rationally, a little bit more logically, asking them to verbalize things. These are all kind of left brain kind of things that that I can help train. And I think that's an important part in your practicing. The most important thing, as I started saying, was that the left brain can only do one thing at a time. So if you try to do a new fingering and a new bowing and organize that, you're going to confuse yourself. It's too much, it's overload. You have to divide it and do, okay, first a fingering thing, figure out a good fingering, don't worry about the bowing right now. Now, okay, I got a good fingering, let's try with this bowing, see if that works. Or I'll try a slightly different fingering, now try a slightly different bowing, one thing at a time. And that goes with even musical kinds of things. Then when you absorbed it, the left brain, you can put it into the right brain. And of course, as musicians, we need to do lots of things at one time in playing. I mean, it's very complex. Listening to ourselves, watching our own music, watching the conductor if you're an orchestra, listening to your partners in chamber music, so forth. There's a lot going on, and that's all right brain, which is great. But the left brain part of this has to be really strong to be able to get out of the left brain and into the good place with the right brain for performances then. So the next thing here is, be your own teacher, your own critic. And Leonardo da Vinci says, an artist who lacks the power of self-criticism accomplishes but little. It is good if your work stands higher than your opinion of it, bad if it's on the same level, but it's a great disaster if your work stands lower than your judgment of it. And I think that's really true. Nowadays we have wonderful tools that we can use for being our own critic and our own teacher. Tape recorder, of course, the metronome, the metronome is your friend, live by it. Mirrors, videotaping, and even the Skype that we're using now with a lot of our students is just wonderful because the students can see themselves right away. And they can see that their bow hold is funny or whatever, their shoulder's too high or something like that. So we can use those tools in an excellent way. If nothing else, a mirror, the old-fashioned mirror in front of, practicing in front of a mirror is great. The last thing I have there, number 10, I left out because in some ways that's the engine that keeps this whole thing moving, and that is be enthusiastic about your practicing. If you hate practicing and you can't stand being by yourself, like we're all by ourselves right now, and you can't stand that at all, you have to rethink whether this is the right thing to do. I mean, you have to figure out ways to want to do this practicing. You have to like it on some level. You have to like your instrument. You have to like music. And the thing is, as teachers, one of the things we can do is try to figure out ways for the students to become enthusiastic in their practicing, and there are a lot of tricks for that. I probably don't have time to go into it, but just making sure that they have. I mean, some people use things like stickers or whatever, but everybody is different in this kind of thing. And for some people, having a goal of by the end of next week you're gonna play in master class. That's a good goal for people. Or of course, recitals is a great goal. Whatever kinds of ways of giving somebody the tools to be able to want to go in there and practice. Some people are very competitive and love competitions, and if that works for somebody, that's a good way. Some people just need they're not doing it maybe for exactly the right reasons, and you have to help them rethink why they're playing an instrument, and hopefully you can help them find. In most cases, in my experience in all these years, I found that there are very few people that don't have some good reason to want to be as good a musician as they can be. Whether or not they're going to be professionals, that's not the point. But because a lot of my students, especially pre-college students, become doctors and lawyers and other professions, and that's wonderful. We need them. Obviously, they're the supporters of music, and they're the vast audience out there. So, but hopefully I've helped them figure out, even if they're not going to be a professional musician, how to want to do what they're doing, and how to practice and that sort of thing. So let's see. I guess we're almost out of time. I think maybe I can go very quickly. It means I'm not going to get any questions. I don't know what the best thing is to get a couple of questions. Sarah, were there a lot of questions there that I'm... Okay, so maybe what I'm going to do is go on to the next thing I want to do, which is the how to practice flowchart, which is something I developed because I realized that people were coming in for lessons, let's say at a certain level when they're working on etudes, and they were doing, I had to say the same thing basically to every student. So all of a sudden I realized, well, if I just make a flow chart of what you have to do, you do this and then you do this and then you do this, it saves me a lot of time and energy. And so I came up with this, well, let me show you first what that is. This little thing called the How to Practice Flow Chart. And by the way, if you don't get this here and want to get a copy of it, you can go to my website, and it's free on the website there. You can find that. So some of my students then ended up putting it on their wall because it was a good direction of how to practice. So I often do this with the Duport Etude number 11 there, and I'll show you a little bit how this is going to work. But basically, you start the piece, you get an overall idea of the piece the first time you look at it. This is like a computer flow chart that if it says yes, it means you go there, and if it says no, then you go there. So in this case, let's say you get an overall idea of the thing, and you start putting in your fingerings and bowings, and then you play some of the spots, the hard spots. Then you try a little playthrough again. Okay, this is after whatever, depending on how hard the piece is, a couple of days or even weeks. After doing all of this, you do a little playthrough. Oh, if it doesn't work, then you need to do the spots. And the spots are these things on the right side. That's the key to this whole thing. Everything that's on the right side.
Give you a couple of minutes to ask them because you told them to wait to the end.
Oh, okay. So I'll at 5 minutes. Okay, in a couple of minutes I might be able to get through this, and then I'll take some questions. And Sarah, you probably have to write the questions or show me your iPad because I don't have them here. So the left side is what people do anyway. It's the right side that's going to be sort of a little different maybe. So you do the playthrough, and then it doesn't work, you do these spots. And if it does work, then you go on, you figure out your desired metronome marking. If it doesn't work at the tempo you want to play it, you go slower, you put numbers down the side of the page, then you work up the desired number, one number at a time, or two numbers at a time, very slowly work it up. And I usually ask the students also to write this down on the music. And if that works, then we go, obviously, dynamics. And it doesn't mean you have to wait to that point to do the dynamics. You can do it earlier, but I think it generally is a good idea to sort of get some of this sorted out. So dynamics, the style of phrasing, again, that could be done earlier. You do your final playthrough. If it doesn't work, let's say you go to your lesson and you do this and you play it, it doesn't work, then you need to turn off the sound.
He said it's okay to go over.
Oh, it's okay. Play spots. So if it doesn't work, then you go and you play the spots. And so now I'll show you what I mean by play spots. So let's see. So the piece I'm going to be playing in a second is going to be the Duport Etude number 11 there. And the first thing is you analyze the technical difficulties of it. Well, let me play the beginning of that etude. First of all, that's this here. There is not that hard. If the student is ready for this kind of thing, if they've done the Lee etudes and the Dotzauer etudes before, playing that first page is really not very hard. I usually say a couple of things about the intonation, the tritones in there, the augmented seconds, the G sharps being high and stuff like that. It takes a few minutes to go through that. The next thing though is the first spot is on let's see if I can get the next page, that top of the next page there. And so the first thing you want to do then in playing this is, again, you just get an overall idea. Okay, and then you I'll put back the practice flowchart so you see what I'm talking about. The next thing there is you analyze the technical difficulties of this passage. And the technical difficulties in this case is going to be, or one of the main things is going to be the intonation. So the next thing you have to do is, in analyzing this, what I ask people to do is to go through very carefully, and you see there's the next page I'm showing. This is what a student would write with the little pluses there. The little pluses on top of the music means every note you can check in this passage. So the G, F sharp you can't check. Okay, A you can check. G again. B you can check by going across. Check the perfect fourth. C, the D, and so forth. Going through every note in this passage, and for every note you'll see there's on the little pluses there, means you can check in some way. So even in the top positions there, so let's say harmonic, G, check. The B natural you check by going across. And you get the fifth. And so forth. Going through this whole passage, this is the hardest part, of course, and check every note. Then you go down to the next thing there. Oops, I think I gotta go back to the. Okay, so the next thing now is, what's that?
Frozen on mine.
It's frozen?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll keep going. I don't know if it, my wife says that something froze, so I'm not sure why. The next thing is to play single bows for the intonation. Oh, that's what we just did. Checking the notes slowly. If that doesn't work, you go back to the step before, which says analyze the technical difficulties and so forth. If it works and you're doing pretty well with the checking, you go on to the next thing with single bows, no checking. Of course, no vibrato. Just single bows. And so forth. Okay. Then the next thing is the key to this, and that's what I call bag of tricks. And the bag of tricks is basically just rhythms. I usually start 2, 3, 4, and then dotted rhythms. So 2 would be 3 would be triplet. 4, 16. And then dotted rhythm. The other dotted rhythm. And basically what this is doing, the concept here, is that I'm still working with the intonation on this part, but by putting a little more complex bowings in, I'm taking my attention off of the left hand and putting it on this for a second. And if this is solid, I'll be able to get through the whole passage with these different bowings. You can make up your own bowings also, but I usually start with 2, 3, 4 and dotted rhythms like that. If that doesn't work and you can't get through, you go back a step, the note, to single bows, no checking. And then you go back another step if you need to do the checking and so forth. Basically, it's a feedback system, and you constantly go around this practice flowchart and get, improve the things and then slowly go on. If you're done with the bag of tricks and you play the short passage, if it works again, you play through that passage, that's great. If it doesn't, then you go back. And then you connect with a larger passage, go before a little bit, go after a little bit, and then you're ready to go back to the top there to play the spots and try to play through. So that's the quick and dirty version of this. We're about at time right now.
You do have some questions.
Okay, and what I'll just show you, so that was that. Oh, this is another Mary's. I'm not going to go into it now, but that's if you look on my website, you'll see how I do the Mary exercises for the same thing. That would be another way of looking at intonation, going through it all by doing these various Marys. If you want to check out all the things that I have on my website, it's all free, and there are articles and even an article on the practically perfect practicing and on the practice flow chart here. You can do that, and then if you would like to contact me otherwise, if you have any questions that I'm not able to answer now, then you can email me.
Do you see the questions?
No, I don't see any questions.
Okay,
so,
here. Starting with
Oh, can you give us an idea of ordering of etudes? So, yeah, I have that also on my website if you want to see it. But I start most certainly pre-college students. I'll start with Dotzer etudes, then go to Lee etudes. Then I'll after the Lee we go to the Duport, and I start with this number 11 usually because by that time they've already have a pretty good technique generally, and they can start thinking about their practicing more. So this Duport etude, and I do about half of the Duport, the 21 etudes. Then I go to Popper, Opus 76 one, after that, and then go back to like Franchomme, one of the Franchomme books, and I do all the caprices in the Franchomme. And then go to Popper 73, the high school, and after they're well into that, there's all kinds of other wonderful stuff. Survey is terrific to do in between, Grutzmacher, all the other. But it's a diet of etudes that I have students practice, and very often memorizing a lot of them also at the same time. And usually they have two etudes that they're working on. One is a new one, and one is the playthrough, quote unquote playthrough, as I talked about one. So they're getting through a lot of these etudes. I think it's very unhealthy to jump to the hard etudes, and especially for students who are not ready for the Popper high school etudes. Then they pick, sometimes they'll pick the easier ones and think they're doing a Popper etude. That's not really what the Popper etudes are about. But if one's really able to do them, they're the best thing in the world. And Starker used to always say in master classes, all you need in your playing your Dvorak concerto, all you need is 40 Popper etudes and you'll be fine.
Okay. How do you approach analyzing what the source of a problem is?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's where the understanding, why don't you just leave it here now? That's where your understanding of the technique comes in. And for that, that's where the fuer, that's where the best thing is the 2-octave scale and arpeggios in the fuer book. Memorizing all of those so you have every key really in your fingers, in your system. Then starting, I did a list once of all the different scale systems that are out there, and there are 40 or 50 different scale systems. So I'm constantly rotating. I have a very definite system of which one's first, second, third, but there's when they're done with the 2-octave scales and arpeggios in the fuer, then I'll go to the thumb position scales in the fuer and so forth, and there's a whole series of these kinds of things. But you build your technique, same thing with the bowing technique, through understanding. I think exercises is the best thing for understanding how the body works, the arm and so forth, building intonation also. Resources for developing fine intonation. Wow, there's so many resources out there. Hans-Jürgen Jensen just came out with a fantastic book that you should probably be aware of. Understanding there are lots of different systems of intonation. There's no simple answer to that, but there's a lot of resources out there, and I have one thing I like to do with my students, and I have like what I call the 5-step process for how do you play in tune on the cello. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it really is a good system for thinking about intonation. So the first thing I say that in developing good intonation, you have to hear it in your head. You have to hear a sound in your head. Well, how do you hear, let's say, if I say play a C on the A string, how do you hear that C before you play it? Well, if you have perfect pitch, you can hear a C, whether it's really an in-tune C, depending on, A440, A442, I mean, who knows? But you can hear it. If you don't have perfect pitch, you have to have, pluck the A string first. But you have to hear that C then in your head. So the first thing is hear it in your head. And the concept there is imagining. The second step is predict where that C is. So you predict where first position, second finger is. Okay, so that's muscle memory, basically. The third step is listening. And the difference between hearing and listening, hearing is passive, listening is active. So the third step there, you're playing that C and you're listening, is it really in tune with my open C string or resonating and so forth, okay? So that's the listen step. And the fourth step is, you're going towards the fifth step, really. The fifth step is adjusting. because nobody absolutely puts their finger down in the right place all the time that matches their partners, the piano, the orchestra, whatever. You always have to be aware that you're going to be adjusting. And in order to do the adjusting, the fourth step is relax. So it's hearing in your head is the first thing. Second thing is predicting, muscle memory. Third thing is listening, that's active. The fourth thing is relax, and the fifth thing is adjust. And that has to all happen within a split second. So if you watch a video, for example, of Heifetz, there's a fantastic video out there of him playing something really fast, and they slowed it down. So it's one note at a time. And you see on every note, there's a little adjustment because it's so quick from his ear to his finger that it's just automatic. And he's probably not even aware that he's making that adjustment, but it's a very, very quick adjustment. So that's the simple answer.
Someone asked if you could share the documents.
Oh, I'm not sure which documents you mean, but there's a lot of this stuff is on my website. You see the Google site, Robert Jesselson. You can just Google that and find the website.
There's a couple.
I feel it's hard to get any better out of typical practice of scales and arpeggios. How would you recommend to implement things in a way that's beneficial? Well, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that. What the typical practice of scales and arpeggios. I think what you're doing when you're practicing scales is you're building the intonation, you're building your understanding of the pitch, you're building different scale systems that you understand, a Dorian scale or a Phrygian scale or a major scale and so forth. All these different kinds of scales. You're training your ear, you're training your body, and training coordination. Lots of different things that you could be training. So I'm not exactly sure what you mean by your question. How can practice change depending on what instruments are playing? I mean, like chamber music, how to work intonation and string quartet. Wow, that's a very complex question. I really probably don't have time to answer that right away. But I think Paul has a video on Cello Bello that addresses a lot of chamber music kind of things with intonation. Intonation is a complex topic, and add to that mix the how you vibrate, whether you vibrate up to, vibrate above, vibrate, those questions, and different people have different opinions about those. I mean, it's complex. I can't just answer this really quickly now.
You should probably say the question out loud. So
okay. Question from, can you elaborate on body aspects regarding, how many more questions are there? I mean, I don't want to go on too long. But of course, people can just drop off if.
Not too many, just a few.
How can you elaborate on body aspects regarding the left and right side of the brain? Well, so the way this concept of left and right brain works is a little different from the thing that we know. The left brain operates the right side, and the right brain operates the left side. That's one aspect of that. But this is a slightly different thing. And frankly, I'm not sure that neurologists really are completely sold anymore. And this is like a concept that went back. I started thinking about this when I was reading things in the 1980s. And later in the late 90s and 2000s, people were starting to say, maybe it's not quite so, black and white as left-right brain with the analog. And it really works for me in understanding how my students work and understanding how I work. And the thing that really clicked for me in understanding this was when I was living in Montana. It was my first teaching job at Montana State University, and there was a really snowy day, and I was driving from Bozeman, Montana State University, to Billings, and I had to go through a pass, and this pass had a big drop off, and so it was a narrow road, and it was a big drop off, and I was driving, and there was a truck in front of me, and there was a car behind me. And the truck in front of me slowed down a lot. And so I slowed down a lot, but the guy behind me was clearly not slowing down a lot. And I could see in my rearview mirror that I could see him coming closer and closer. And the fear, of course, is that it was going to knock me off off the road and into the ditch there. And that was more than a ditch. It went way down to a river. And what happened then is, for some reason, everything turned slow motion. I could see him coming in, and he was about to hit me, everything slowed down, and I was going like this, slow motion. And I was able to guide the car in the right way and slow down and so forth, and things were okay. And I realized afterwards, because I was thinking a lot about this left-right stuff, what happened is the left brain, with that time sense of going fast and so forth, and cut out in the emergency, and everything was slow motion. And that's the right brain taking over and allowing me to do what I need to do. It's a great place to be in a performance. Everything feeling slow motion. And if you practice that way, it really does feel that way. And then you can adjust better intonation and everything else.
I think you've got one final question.
Okay. Oh, Lucas. Hi, Lucas. Do you have any tips on shoulder placement, especially when going to higher octaves, especially advice on injury prevention and being relaxed with no tension? Yeah. That's a big one. You know, that's one of the causes, a big cause of tendinitis, things going down here, problems that start up there. And I think one of the best things to do actually is just hug your cello really low down, almost by the bridge. And then just kind of come back with where your shoulders were. So you don't come back like this, but you keep your shoulders where you were and just come back to that thumb position there or fourth position or whatever. And just being really aware of the cause of, for a lot of people, of tension, tendinitis and other things is coming from the shoulders. So basically when you're going up in upper position, you shouldn't be going this way at all. I mean, it's all, this has to start with relaxation here. Okay, thank you all so much. Tomorrow I think the CelloChat is Joshua Roman, which should be really interesting. I think it's in the evening. It's been great talking with you, and hopefully you enjoyed and learned something and thought about, or will think about something having to do with practicing, and stay healthy. And I wish everybody the best. If you want to contact me, you can do so by email. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.